I'm giving somebody the blues today.
In this video today, we're going to be doing a little bit of a comparison between all the fighting games. Now, I know that some people don't like these kind of videos. They want every fighting game to shine and succeed on their own without the comparisons. But at times, I think it is necessary when you talk about just one, the reality of the situation. Like with Virtual Fighter kind of marketing their game in direct competition with Tekken 8. A lot of the things that the Tekken 8 players been complaining about over the past year, Virtual Fighter is trying to sell their game as grounded, real, gritty, true martial arts, right? So there is a lot of times where these fighting games go head to head, and I think it's important to also compare their sales and their success head to head. Also in this video, I want to talk about Harada's tweet where he spoke about the ancient rivalry of DOA and how that kind of shaped the foundations of Tekken and fighting games today. If you're new to the channel, hit that subscribe button. We recently crossed the 28,000 subscribers, and now our next milestone is 30,000 subscribers. Let's hit it. Let's smash that goal. Subscribe to the channel. But with that, let's do this. First, we got to start with Tekken 8. Now, it is no surprise that year one of Tekken 8 was kind of controversial. From the surprise reveal of the shop, to the trying to destroy mods, to them over monetizing the game, releasing stages, to the balancing of the game. But also, myself and many others have faith in the developers to do right and make Season 2 great. With that being said, I do want to start off by comparing their Steam reviews. Mortal Kombat 1 is mostly positive. Street Fighter 6 is also mostly positive. Now, Tekken 8 is also mostly positive, but as you can see, recent reviews is mixed. Street Fighter 6 recently announced that they sold 4.4 million units worldwide. If you rewind the clock a year ago, February 14th, Street Fighter was at 3 million copies sold. Mortal Kombat 1 was at 3 million plus in January 2024, and then Tekken 8 just released, and at the time in February they sold 2 million copies in under 3 weeks. At this point in time, Tekken 8 was selling faster than all of those other games. Also keep in mind that Tekken 8 sold 1 million copies day one, so it beat Street Fighter's record of 5 days. So Tekken 8 was cooking very early on, and this tweet is something that players celebrated. Tekken is kind of considered the least popular of the three. We know Mortal Kombat is mentioned through TV shows and music and all type of pop culture. Same thing with Street Fighter. But Tekken is kind of one of those things where you kind of hear about it. It's making so much more waves now in more recent times, but it definitely was like on the sleeper side. If you didn't know, you didn't know. So to see Tekken beating both of those games in terms of sales, this had the player base through the roof. Now, when you fast forward a year later, exactly, you can see that Tekken 8 has slowed down. Now, I mentioned this on Twitter and a lot of people did not like it, but I just think like this is just the statistical facts, right? Tekken 8 at one point in time was selling faster than Street Fighter and Mortal Kombat and was seeming like it was going to catch up pretty fast. But with all of the controversy for year one, the sales of that game kind of came to a halt. What I said on Twitter is Tekken 8 hasn't sold 3 million units. Meanwhile, Street Fighter 6 sold 4.4 million units. In 1 year's time, they added an extra 1.4 million units to their total sales. And then Mortal Kombat sold over 5 million units. So in that same year time, they sold 2 million copies. So Tekken 8 has not hit 1 million copies in a year. Street Fighter went up a 1.4, and then Mortal Kombat went up 2 million. So you can see that the sales of Tekken, as it currently stands, slowed down. A shout out to Radoink again. Radoink is awesome. He has a website, Tekken Underground, which is also awesome. That's where I get a lot of pictures to show you guys and stuff from. So go check him out if you're unfamiliar. But this graph is really interesting because it shows all of the games comparatively from day 0 all the way to day like 600 plus, which is Street Fighter because it came out first, right? But you can see Mortal Kombat is kind of beating Street Fighter. Street Fighter came out first and Mortal Kombat overtook it. That's not a surprise to many people. When you talk about this graph as well, you also got to mention what happened in the previous generation. This is why I think it's so important to highlight, because in the previous generation, Tekken sold more than Street Fighter, and Harada was so happy about it, and he was talking about it in every news article, in every single thing. He was talking about it nonstop. Also, there's this idea that Tekken 8 hit 3 million sales and they just haven't said it yet, which I necessarily don't agree with, because here's why. Every single time Tekken has reached a new milestone, starting at 3 million, they announced it. And we could go back and look at those individual tweets and also interviews and calculate exactly what day. So take a look at this graph here. You can see 500 days, 200 days later, 209, 209. The fastest Tekken 7 sold 1 million copies was actually the lead up until Tekken 8's release. So Tekken 8 was a very monstrous game on release, selling 2 million copies in the first month, but also selling 1 million extra copies for Tekken 7. Now, this is something that you also got to keep in mind too when you talk about all three of these games in comparison with one another. Tekken 8 still is kind of like a juggernaut because Mortal Kombat and Street Fighter is on more platforms. Meanwhile, Tekken 8 is exclusively on the next generation and PC. There was a leak saying that Tekken 8 will come to Switch, so who knows what that'll do in terms of sales, but Tekken 8 is the only of the three that is not on all those platforms. So even though we're comparing, you gotta keep that in mind, because if it did release in old platforms, who knows, it probably will be beating Street Fighter 6, which is crazy to think. And this is why I highlight these sales figures, because this is how powerful people think. This is like some type of slander towards Tekken, but this is powerful for Tekken to be, competing in this way while ignoring the past generation is absurd. It's unheard of. Tekken, through all of this controversy, is still a juggernaut. A lot of people dropped this game. They're angry with this game, and the game is still seeing great success, winning awards, breaking records, and competing with the other fighting game titans. I think this is something to celebrate. But if we shift our topics and we talk about Harada's tweet where he broke down the rivalry between DOA. It's a lengthy one. I had AI read it to me and it took 20 minutes for AI to read it. So I won't take that long to read it, but I will just give you some of the highlights that I noted while AI was reading it to me. It starts off with this person here who is thanking Harada for supporting the virtual fighter community. Someone responds to this picture of Harada with this news article where it shows the guy who was previously in charge of DOA basically saying he hates the original Tekken, Tekken 2, Tekken 3, Tekken 4, and then Tekken 5. There's a little bit more there, but you can see it says disappoint me. Like, the guy just seems to be the biggest hater here. Now, this is where Harada explains why this is. Like I said, this tweet is far too long to read word by word, so I'll give you a general breakdown of what Harada is saying in this very, very lengthy tweet. I didn't even know tweets could be this long. So Harada basically says that in the early days, this is like the early 90s, that the Tekken team randomly met the Sega team at an event, and after they all went out to eat. And after that, Tekken eventually created a polygon test demo that would end up becoming Tekken. That story I could go super deep into, how Tekken started off as like a test demo, but then it became its own game, but it's too complex of a subject to really break down. But after that, Itagaki learned that Harada went to the same college as him, and he started to like little homie Harada. He started to speak to Harada as if he was like a child, basically. And in Japan, that's a very big thing. I think for anyone, that's kind of a big thing. At that time as well, Sega and Namco dominated early era Japan, like the video game market. You can still argue that they do today, but this time it's just with different games, not necessarily fighting games. From this success, born a one-sided rivalry from Itagaki. He basically trash talked him over many different interviews and news articles, and not only Harada directly, like personally, but also Tekken itself. This is how Itagaki marketed his game. He marketed as like, that game Tekken, that franchise suck. Our game is so much better. And even though that was something that was frowned upon in Japan to do that, overseas in America, that type of marketing, Harada said, it was very successful. And that's how DOA kind of like got their foot in the door to compete with Tekken at a point. A couple of years later, Harada said he was called by Itagaki. When he showed up, Itagaki showed off a new version of DOA 2 that hasn't been released yet, and he wanted Harada to try it. once Harada was trying it, he was basically like backseat gaming the whole time, and Harada really couldn't get a true test for it. But then after that whole thing, he basically declared to his team and to everyone, today we beat Tekken. That's what he basically got from Harada, as he was like backseat gaming the whole time. And Harada felt the type of way about that. He was also flexing that he had Tekken's sales, customer different demographics, and that he was using all of that to market DOA better. This guy had a very obnoxious like relationship with Harada and Tekken, and it was all to try and beat them. He was slandering Tekken, and he was like, you know, trying to get all these sound bites from Harada just to like make his game better. And this is kind of what happens when you're at the top. Everyone will try to take shots at you, jabs at you, and try to get you to react in a way so they can then capitalize off of it. And Harada, he basically goes on to say that he didn't like this, and also he said in this that he was told by his supervisors at the time to not respond. So this is why this happened for like a 10-year period, and Harada never responded because he couldn't, and now he can, which is why he gives this long breakdown. After all of that, around 2008, Harada said basically, at the time when Itagaki was leaving the company, he called up Harada, and he was kind of entering in retirement. He called up Harada, and he was telling him that, you know, everything that happened was not personal. It was never personal. It was all just business. They kind of had this conversation about game development, and Harada said that kind of became a tradition over the next couple of years, but recently it doesn't happen anymore. This is a really great read. I suggest you guys to have AI read it to you as well, but you can just see here how like these fighting games be having rivalries that's friendly, but then also rivalries that's very, very intense. And stories like this from Harada just gives us deeper insight into what happened then and what also could be happening now. These fighting games, in my opinion, are more competitive than ever. The landscape is so different now. He was also talking about the death of arcades and how Tekken was the first to switch over to home consoles, but now all of the fighting games do. All of the fighting games are at events. All of the fighting games of Wi-Fi, online, you know, DLC, you know, yearly reveals, characters. It's a very competitive market, and to see all of these developers find their way in that, find their successes, maybe it's small, maybe it's a lot. It's just incredible to see. You know, I love the numbers, which is why I do all these comparisons, and I also just like all of these different fighting games.